It was a night I would never forget. There I was, lying on the cold, hard corridor floor, unable to move. My body was completely still, my legs frozen, and my arms useless at my sides. A sharp pain coursed through my body, but that wasn't what had my heart racing. No, it was my son's mocking voice that sent a chill down my spine. "Mom, are you really just going to lie there like that? Are you pretending to be helpless now?" He laughed, but there was no kindness in his tone. His voice echoed in the hallway, bouncing off the walls of our house as he stood over me, arms crossed, eyes filled with irritation. I had no choice but to endure his mocking. For a second, I thought about speaking, about asking for help, but my mouth felt dry and my voice was caught in my throat. My body refused to obey me. I could hear his footsteps as he turned and walked away, probably going off to continue whatever he had been doing before this. But I wasn't going to let it slide. No, this wasn't just about the mocking. This was about respect. I may have been his mother, but that didn't mean I deserved to be treated like this, especially not when I had given so much of myself to care for him. So, I did something that no one expected. I closed my eyes and focused. Deep in my mind, I called upon the powers of my past, those little tricks I'd learned over the years, the things that didn't seem possible but that I had learned to control. A slight smile crept onto my lips as I felt the magic surge inside me. The air in the hallway grew colder, and the sound of the house seemed to fade into silence. And then, it happened. My son, who had turned his back on me, was frozen in place. He couldn't move a muscle. His eyes widened in shock as he looked around, unable to understand what was happening. He tried to speak, but no sound came out. The once mocking tone he had carried was gone, replaced by fear. He tried to take a step, but his body was paralyzed. The nightmare had begun, and it was a nightmare he wouldn't wake up from. But as the chill spread throughout the hallway, I knew something more was coming. It wasn't just a game anymore. I had to show him the lesson he needed to learn. I had to make him understand what happens when you don't show respect. But before I could do more, a loud crash echoed from the kitchen. My son's fear seemed to give way to confusion, and as the noise grew louder, I knew something terrible was about to happen. I took a deep breath, ready to face whatever came next. But would I be able to stop it in time? Earlier that day, things had been peaceful, or at least, as peaceful as they could be in our home. My son, Jason, had come home from school, as usual, and we had a quick chat over breakfast. It was a quiet morning, just like any other. "You look tired, Mom," he had said as he picked at his cereal. "I'm fine, Jason," I had replied, offering him a smile, though my body was beginning to betray me. I had been feeling the weight of age more and more lately, the aches and pains creeping into my every move. But I didn't want to show him how much I was struggling. He shrugged and turned his attention to his phone, scrolling through social media, his focus far away from our conversation. I watched him, my heart aching just a little. He was growing up so fast, becoming more independent, and sometimes, it felt like I was being left behind. "Don't forget we're having dinner with your aunt tonight," I reminded him, trying to make sure he remembered. "Yeah, sure, whatever," Jason replied absently, still lost in his phone. It wasn't that he was a bad kid, he wasn't, but lately, I felt like he was growing distant, like he was losing that connection we used to have. It hurt, but I tried to ignore it. Maybe it was just a phase. Later, I went about my day. I spent some time in the garden, tending to the flowers that I loved so much. There was something soothing about the dirt beneath my hands, the smell of the flowers blooming around me. It made me forget, even just for a moment, about the aches in my body, about the creeping feeling that time was slipping away faster than I could keep up. As I worked, I couldn't help but think back to when Jason was younger. He used to sit beside me in the garden, asking questions, telling me about his day. We'd laugh together, talk about everything and nothing at all. Now, he seemed so distant, so wrapped up in his own world. By the time I finished in the garden, I was exhausted. I knew I couldn't keep up with Jason anymore, but I still tried to be there for him. I cooked dinner as usual, hoping that the smell of the food would draw him into the kitchen. But when he came home, he barely acknowledged me, as if I were just part of the background. Dinner was awkward. We sat across from each other, eating in silence, occasionally exchanging a few words. But it was nothing like it used to be. "Are you okay, Mom?" Jason finally asked, his voice suddenly softer. "I'm fine," I lied, trying to smile through the pain. "Just tired." He nodded, but I could see the doubt in his eyes. I knew he could tell something was wrong, but he didn't ask any more questions. Instead, he excused himself and went to his room, leaving me alone with my thoughts. That's when it happened. I collapsed. I don't know what caused it exactly, whether it was the exhaustion from the day or something deeper, but my body gave out. I couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't even call for help. I found myself lying on the corridor floor, unable to do anything. That's when Jason found me. And that's when everything changed. Mom. Jason's voice was high-pitched with panic, but I couldn't answer him. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. He stood there for a moment, looking at me with wide eyes, before he did what I feared most. He laughed. "You're just lying there. Are you pretending?" he said, the mockery evident in his voice. "Mom, get up. This is ridiculous." His words stung more than they should have, but I held my ground. I had to. I couldn't let him see how much his words hurt me. And then, just as I had planned, the nightmare began. I felt the air around me grow colder, the temperature dropping in an instant. I closed my eyes and focused, calling upon the strength I had gathered over the years, pulling on every bit of power I had. The darkness around me seemed to grow thicker, as if the house itself was shifting. Jason didn't understand what was happening at first. He reached down to touch me, but as his hand neared, he froze. The warmth of his skin disappeared, replaced by an icy chill. His face contorted in confusion. "What's going on?" he whispered, his voice trembling. And that's when I knew, I had him right where I wanted him. The chilling silence that followed was almost unbearable. Jason stood frozen in place, his eyes wide with fear, but no words came from his mouth. He reached for me again, but his hand trembled as if he could feel the unseen force that surrounded us. He wanted to move, to break free, but his body betrayed him, and he remained motionless, like a puppet with its strings cut. I could see the panic beginning to set in, creeping across his face. His breathing became shallow, quick, he couldn't understand what was happening, and that made it even worse. I had spent years learning about the strange, hidden powers that ran through my veins, powers that had been passed down from generations before me. I wasn't sure I fully understood them, but in that moment, I knew exactly what to do. I had to teach him a lesson he would never forget. "You mock me, Jason," I whispered, my voice barely audible but carrying with it the weight of years of frustration, of silent suffering, of being taken for granted. "You laugh at me when I'm in pain, when I need you the most. You forget who I am. I won't allow you to forget again." Jason's face twisted in confusion. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He tried to speak, to scream, but the words wouldn't form. His eyes darted around, desperate for an escape, but he was trapped, his legs, his arms, everything, frozen in place by the power I had unleashed. I had always been the one to protect him, to guide him through the hardships of life, but in this moment, the roles were reversed. Now, I was in control. But just as quickly as it started, it stopped. Jason blinked rapidly, his body suddenly released from the invisible chains that held him. He stumbled backward, breathing heavily, his heart racing. His hands shook, and I could see the realization dawning on him. He wasn't in control anymore. What did you do to me?" he gasped, his voice shaking with a mixture of fear and disbelief. "I didn't do anything," I replied calmly, though the anger that had been building inside me had not fully dissipated. "You did this to yourself. You mocked me. You belittled me. Now you'll understand what it feels like to be powerless." Jason stood there, unable to speak, his fear palpable in the air between us. I saw his body tense, as if he was waiting for something more to happen. But I didn't move. I let the silence linger, the weight of his own terror settling over him. "I'm sorry, Mom," Jason finally whispered, his voice barely a breath. "I didn't mean it. I didn't know you were in so much pain." I didn't answer him right away. My gaze remained fixed on him, watching him squirm under my silent judgment. My heart was still heavy, but the anger had subsided, replaced by something deeper, something I wasn't sure how to name. Regret. Pity. Or maybe it was just the realization that this wasn't the way I had hoped things would be. For a moment, I just stood there, staring at my son, who was no longer the boy I remembered. He was a man now, someone who had lost the tenderness he once had, someone who had learned to mock the very person who had given him everything. But that was the way of the world, wasn't it? You gave your all, and sometimes, it wasn't enough. Do you understand now, Jason? I asked, my voice softer than I intended. Do you see what happens when you forget who I am? Jason nodded slowly, his eyes full of shame. Yes, Mom. I'm sorry. I didn't realize. I've been so wrapped up in my own world that I never stopped to think about you. About what you need. I didn't respond. The truth was, I wasn't sure if words could fix anything anymore. Not after everything that had happened, not after how distant he had become. Not after the years of pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. You're right, I finally said, my voice quieter now, filled with sorrow. You've been so wrapped up in your own world that you didn't even see me. But that's okay. Maybe now you'll understand how important it is to take a moment, to see the people around you. To see your mother, who has always been there for you. Jason didn't speak. He stood there, his face etched with regret, his hands still shaking. I could see that he was processing everything that had just happened. It was clear that he had never imagined something like this, never imagined that the mother he had taken for granted had the power to make him feel so powerless. But it wasn't just about the power I held, it was about respect. It was about learning that you can't treat the ones you love as if they are invincible. Everyone has their limits, and sometimes, it takes a little shock to remind us of that. Just when I thought the tension had dissipated, a loud crash came from the kitchen. The sound reverberated through the house, shaking the walls and the floor beneath our feet. Jason and I both turned toward the noise. He looked at me, his eyes wide with confusion and fear. What was that? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I don't know, I replied, but I had a sinking feeling in my stomach. The noise didn't sound like something falling by accident, it sounded deliberate. And I wasn't sure what we were about to face. Before we could make a move, the lights flickered, casting the house in an eerie glow. The temperature in the hallway dropped even further, and I could feel a strange sensation creeping up my spine, as though the house itself was reacting to something dark, something dangerous. Mom, Jason whispered, his voice trembling. What's happening? I didn't answer him. Instead, I slowly stood up, my legs shaking slightly from the power I had used earlier. There was something wrong, something more than just the moment we had shared. The nightmare wasn't over yet. I stepped cautiously toward the kitchen, my heart pounding in my chest. Jason hesitated for a moment, then followed me, his footsteps barely audible on the cold floor. We were moving deeper into the house, toward the source of the crash. But what awaited us in that kitchen was something neither of us could have ever predicted. The silence in the house was deafening as Jason and I crept toward the kitchen. The cold air clung to us like a second skin, and the once familiar hum of our home now seemed ominously distant. Each step we took felt like it echoed through the darkened hallways, a stark contrast to the quiet of the night. My heart pounded in my chest, but I couldn't tell if it was from the lingering tension or the dread of what awaited us in the kitchen. Jason stayed close behind me, his breathing shallow and quick, almost as if he could sense the same unease I felt. I could hear his footsteps, light but hurried, as if he too didn't want to disturb the heavy silence around us. When we reached the kitchen door, I hesitated for just a moment, my hand resting on the cold metal of the doorknob. The crash I'd heard earlier had come from here, and whatever had caused it, I had a feeling it wasn't just an accident. The temperature had dropped significantly, and I could feel it in my bones. Something was wrong, something that had been brewing for far longer than I'd realized. I pushed the door open slowly, the creak of the hinges breaking the silence. The sight that met us was nothing short of chilling. The kitchen, usually warm and welcoming, was now a scene of chaos. The once neatly arranged counter was cluttered with broken dishes, scattered glass shards glinting in the low light. The kitchen table had been knocked over, its legs twisted in unnatural angles, and the floor was slick with something I couldn't quite identify. The room felt heavy, as if the very air had been thickened by something unseen. "What the?" Jason gasped, his voice trembling. His eyes darted around the room, wide with disbelief. What happened here? I didn't know. I honestly didn't. But the feeling in the pit of my stomach told me this was no ordinary mess. This was something far darker. As I stepped further into the room, something caught my eye, a shadow, moving at the far corner, just beyond the kitchen sink. It was quick, too quick for a normal person to move, and for a moment, I thought I imagined it. But then it happened again, and I knew I hadn't. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. "Jason, stay back," I whispered, my voice barely audible. But it was too late. Jason, his curiosity piqued, had already taken a step forward. I reached out to stop him, but as I did, the shadow moved again, this time much closer, and the room seemed to shift with an eerie crackling sound. Jason froze. His body went rigid, and his eyes locked onto the same spot where I had seen the movement. "What is that?" he whispered, his voice full of fear now. Before I could respond, the shadow lunged forward, fast as lightning, and we both gasped in horror as it took shape before us. It wasn't human, not even close. The thing that appeared before us was a dark, shifting mass, its form barely distinguishable, as if made of smoke or mist. But its eyes, its glowing, red eyes, were unmistakable. They burned with an intensity that made every hair on my body stand on end. "Get back," I shouted, instinctively stepping in front of Jason, trying to shield him from the creature. But there was nowhere to run. The creature hissed, a low, guttural sound that sent chills through my very bones. It seemed to grow larger, its form expanding until it filled the space of the kitchen, pressing in on us. I could feel its presence like a weight on my chest, suffocating and oppressive. For a moment, we stood frozen in place, too terrified to move. The creature's red eyes glowed brighter, its form becoming more solid, its body crackling with an unnatural energy that vibrated through the room. Then, as quickly as it had appeared, the creature lunged forward, and everything went black. I don't know how long I was unconscious. I woke up on the floor, my head pounding, my body sore, but when I opened my eyes, Jason was nowhere to be seen. The kitchen had returned to its previous state, empty, silent, and still. The dishes were no longer scattered, and the table was upright again. It was as if nothing had happened at all. But I knew it wasn't over. I could still feel the presence of the creature, lurking just beyond my reach, and I knew that whatever it wasn't finished with us. "Jason," I called out, my voice shaky with fear. "Jason, where are you?" But there was no answer. I stumbled to my feet, my legs unsteady, as I scanned the kitchen for any sign of him. I called his name again, but the silence was deafening. The house seemed to hold its breath, waiting for something to happen. And then I felt it, the familiar chill in the air. The sensation that something was watching me. I spun around, my heart in my throat, and that's when I saw it. Jason stood in the doorway, his eyes wide with terror, his body shaking. But what I saw behind him made my blood run cold. The creature, no longer a shadow, but fully formed, was standing just behind him, its glowing red eyes fixed on me. It wasn't just a nightmare, it was real. I couldn't move. My feet felt as if they were glued to the floor, and for a moment, I wondered if I was dreaming. But I knew it wasn't a dream. The nightmare was real, and it was about to consume us both. "Mom," Jason whispered, his voice barely audible. "What is that thing? What's happening?" I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came. The creature's eyes burned brighter, and I felt its power surge through the room. Then, in an instant, everything went dark again. The darkness was suffocating, but it wasn't just the absence of light that made me feel trapped. It was the thick, oppressive energy that seemed to fill the room. I could feel the air around me, cold and sharp, like a knife slicing through my skin. It pressed in on me, pushing down, making it hard to breathe. It was the same feeling I had when the creature first appeared, but now it was heavier, more intense. "Jason," I whispered, my voice trembling. "Can you hear me?" But there was no reply. Only silence. I reached out, but my hand met nothing but cold air. I tried to move, to stand up, but it felt like I was sinking into the floor, my body weighed down by an invisible force. It wasn't just fear that paralyzed me now, it was something more. Something darker. Something ancient. Then, just as I thought I would be swallowed whole by the darkness, I felt a tug on my arm. I jerked back, startled, but the tug persisted, pulling me toward something. "Jason," I called again, panic creeping into my voice. "Where are you?" I reached out in the direction of the pull, my fingers brushing against something solid. It wasn't Jason, but it felt like a wall, cold and smooth, like stone. I pressed my palm against it, feeling the vibrations of something moving on the other side. And then, in a flash, the darkness lifted. The light returned, but it wasn't the warm, comforting glow of the kitchen I had expected. No, this light was harsh and unnatural, flashing, flickering, as if the very essence of it was struggling to hold on. The walls around me were no longer the familiar ones of my home. They were made of blackened stone, covered in ancient symbols and runes that seemed to glow with an eerie light. I blinked, disoriented, trying to make sense of where I was. But the more I looked around, the more it felt like I was in a completely different place, like I had been pulled into some dark, twisted version of reality. Then I saw him. Jason was standing just a few feet away, his body tense, his eyes wide with fear. His clothes were torn, his face pale, and he looked like he had been through a storm. But it was more than just his appearance that caught my attention. It was the way he was looking at me. His expression wasn't just fear, it was terror. Like he had seen something that had completely shattered his understanding of the world. "Mom, what's happening?" Jason's voice was shaky, and I could hear the panic rising in it. "Where are we? What is this place?" I didn't have an answer for him. I didn't even know how to explain what was happening, how we had gotten here. All I knew was that we were no longer in our home. We were somewhere else, somewhere that felt wrong in every possible way. The air here was thick, heavy with an energy that felt ancient, like we had stumbled upon a place that had been forgotten by time. I could feel it pressing in on me, pushing against my chest, making it hard to think. "Mom," Jason said again, his voice desperate now. "Please tell me what's going on. What is this place?" I shook my head, my thoughts racing. I needed to figure out how to get us out of here. I needed to find a way to protect Jason. But no matter how hard I tried, the answers weren't coming. The only thing I could focus on was the ominous presence that lingered in the air, the same presence that had followed us from the kitchen. I turned my gaze back to the shadows, searching for any sign of movement. But there was nothing, only the strange, glowing symbols on the walls and the unsettling silence that seemed to stretch on forever. Suddenly, a low rumble echoed through the room, and the ground beneath us shook. Jason gasped, stumbling back, and I reached out to steady him. "What was that?" he asked, his voice trembling. Before I could answer, the walls began to shift, the runes glowing brighter as if reacting to the sound. The room seemed to pulse, its very structure alive with energy. And then, from the shadows, a figure emerged. It wasn't the creature I had seen before, but it was something just as terrifying. The figure was tall, cloaked in darkness, with a face hidden behind a mask made of what looked like cracked stone. Its presence sent a wave of cold fear through me, and I instinctively stepped in front of Jason, trying to shield him from whatever this thing was. The figure didn't speak at first. It just stood there, its glowing eyes fixed on us. The silence between us was suffocating, and I could feel the pressure building in the air, as if the very space we occupied was closing in around us. Finally, the figure spoke, its voice like gravel scraping against stone. "You shouldn't have come here," it said, its tone low and dangerous. "This place is not for the living." I swallowed hard, my heart racing. "Who are you?" I demanded, trying to steady my voice. "What is this place?" The figure tilted its head, as if amused by my question. "You were not meant to know," it replied, its voice echoing in the room. "But you will learn. All will be revealed in time." The figure took a step toward us, and with each movement, the ground trembled beneath our feet. I took a step back, but Jason didn't move. He just stared at the figure, his face pale with fear. Why are you here? I asked, my voice shaking now. What do you want from us? The figure's mask cracked open, revealing nothing but darkness beneath, a void that seemed to swallow everything around it. The air grew colder still, and I could feel the chill of it deep in my bones. I want nothing from you, the figure said, its voice now a whisper that seemed to come from all directions at once. But you have come to a place where time does not exist. Where the past, present, and future collide. Suddenly, everything seemed to shift. The walls around us began to distort, the runes on them flickering like flames. I felt the ground beneath me pull away, and for a moment, I lost my balance, stumbling toward the edge of the room. But before I could regain my footing, the figure raised its hand, and everything went black again. I don't know how long I was unconscious, but when I woke up, everything had changed. The familiar feeling of the cold stone room was gone, replaced by the warmth of sunlight streaming through a window. I blinked, disoriented, trying to make sense of what had happened. The walls were no longer covered in dark runes, instead, they were painted in soft, calming hues, as if nothing had ever happened. I sat up slowly, my head spinning. Was it all a dream? Had the terrifying figure, the darkness, the strange place, all of it, been nothing more than a nightmare? I looked around, trying to steady my breath, when I saw Jason. He was sitting across from me, staring blankly at the floor, his face pale and drawn, his hands clenched tightly in his lap. He looked just as confused as I felt. Jason, I called softly, my voice hoarse. He didn't respond immediately, and for a moment, I thought he might not even have heard me. But then, slowly, he looked up, his eyes meeting mine. Mom, what happened? His voice was quiet, but I could hear the tremor in it. He was still shaken. I was too. I don't know, I admitted, rubbing my temples as I tried to piece together the scattered memories of the events that had led us here. We were in that place, and then, everything went black. And now we're here. Jason stood up, his legs wobbling beneath him as if he had been lying there for hours. He looked around, clearly unsure of where we were, but he didn't seem to recognize anything either. This place, it feels real, he said, his voice laced with disbelief. But it doesn't make sense. I nodded in agreement. It didn't make sense. Nothing had. But somehow, despite the confusion and the fear still lingering in my chest, I felt something else now. Something different. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but the air around me felt lighter, as if the darkness had finally been lifted. The weight I had been carrying for so long was gone. I stood up, taking in my surroundings. The room was bright and cozy, furnished simply but with care. A warm glow came from the large window, and the faint smell of freshly baked bread filled the air. This didn't look like any place I had ever been, but it didn't feel threatening. It felt peaceful, but there was still a nagging feeling in the back of my mind, a sense that something was unfinished. Something was still waiting. As I glanced around the room, trying to make sense of it all, I noticed a door at the far end, slightly ajar. Without a word, I made my way toward it, Jason following close behind. I reached for the handle and pushed it open, revealing a hallway that stretched into the distance. The walls were lined with old photographs and paintings, but the hallway itself seemed endless. And at the end of it, I could see a faint light, beckoning us forward. I wasn't sure what was waiting for us at the end of the hall, but I knew we had to find out. We had to finish what had started. As we walked down the hallway, the feeling of unease returned. I couldn't shake the thought that we were being watched, that the answers we were searching for were just out of reach. But we kept going, step by step, until we reached the end. There, standing in front of us, was the figure. The same one from before. The one with the mask made of cracked stone, its glowing red eyes fixed on us. Jason gasped, stepping back in fear. I felt a chill wash over me, but I didn't retreat. I couldn't. We had come this far, and I knew we had no choice but to face whatever this was. The figure didn't speak at first. It simply stood there, watching us with its unreadable gaze. The silence stretched on, suffocating, until I could no longer stand it. "What do you want from us?" I asked, my voice steady, though my heart was pounding in my chest. "Why are you here?" The figure tilted its head slightly, and for a moment, I thought I saw something flicker behind its mask. It was almost as if it was studying us, trying to decide what to do next. Finally, it spoke, its voice still that gravelly whisper that sent chills down my spine. "You were not meant to be here," it said. "But you have crossed the threshold. You have entered a place where the boundaries of time and space are no longer fixed." Jason stepped forward, his fear now replaced by determination. "What are you talking about? What is this place? Where are we?" The figure's eyes glowed brighter. "This is the space between worlds," it replied. "A place where the living and the dead, the past and the future, all come together. And you have crossed into it. There is no turning back now." I felt a cold rush of fear, but it was quickly replaced by something else. Something that felt like an answer, an understanding. "So, we're stuck here?" I asked. The figure did not answer immediately. Instead, it stepped forward, its presence filling the hallway, its form growing larger, its eyes burning brighter. "You are not stuck," it finally said. "But you must choose. You must choose to leave this place, or you must choose to stay. If you leave, the memories of what has happened will fade, and you will return to the life you once knew. If you stay, you will become part of this place. A part of what lies beyond the veil." Jason looked at me, his face a mixture of confusion and fear. "What should we do, Mom?" I didn't answer immediately. Part of me wanted to run, to escape this place and never look back. But another part of me knew that I couldn't. The lessons I had learned, the pain I had experienced, had brought me here for a reason. I wasn't sure what that reason was yet, but I knew I had to face it. "We stay," I said, my voice calm and sure. "We face whatever this is." The figure nodded slowly. "Then your journey begins now," it said, and with a sudden flash of light, everything around us began to shift once again. The hallway disappeared, replaced by a vast, empty expanse. The ground beneath our feet was no longer solid, but a swirling, misty void. The air was thick with an otherworldly energy, and I could feel the pull of it in my bones. This was no longer just a nightmare. This was something real, and whatever happened next, I knew it would change us forever.